Hello, everybody. Let's go over this presentation. This is one of the first three topics that we will have before the exam on 1984. And with this topic, we are seeing basic social ethics problems. Because so far in our course, we have seen, for example, in the last lesson was about ethical problems in the very specific field of marketing. Now for us, with these three following topics, is the time for seeing other and more general problems, and I hope that all of these problems are of your interest. Today we start with human rights. And these three topics are under the title of the problems of humanism, because as we will see, humanism is what unifies all of them. So let's start with what humanism is. Humanism is actually a religion. I guess we all will agree that uh, Europe and the Western societies in general is not Christian, are not Christian anymore. Today we have another religion, a religion called humanism, in which nothing is more sacred than human beings. We consider, for example, that human beings are more important than any other beings in the world. Some people among us are against this idea and defend that animals have also rights and should be treated with respect. And some of them say with the same respect that we have towards our fellow humans. But in general, there is a total agreement that human beings are to be respected universally. This is why we can say that in humanism, in this religion, there is nothing more sacred than in the universe than man. And also, we can also say that not all of us believe in God, so we are not sure if there is something above man. Our countries are lay countries; they are not Christian countries. So some people believe and believe in God and say that God is above everything else, but the general agreement and the majority of people say that there is nothing more sacred in the universe than humans. Therefore, we can consider human rights as an expression of that idea, and we can consider human rights as the equivalent to the Ten Commandments in the old Christian religion. Yeah? Things, the boundaries that we have when we act as a society. So we have decided to put to put some rules to our societies, and these rules are the human rights. Now, human rights are actually modern. In Western societies, human rights have not always been respected. Part of the lesson is to learn the most important steps towards the final Declaration of Human Rights. And we will take the Declaration of 1948 as the central and the most important one. It is important to take on account that in traditional societies, the individual often submitted to the group, which is something that you can see in different aspects of the European culture of all ages, of past ages. For example, people in the past didn't sign the books they wrote because they considered that the individual was not important. And also the cathedrals and other major works were done collectively. I mean, there was an architect, for example, but nobody knows who the architect was. His name is not on the record because the individual were not important. But even so, inside these traditional societies, we have found different documents proving that at some point on history, in different points of history, people have thought of the individual rights of people, not only the collective rights of society. For example, in first this first item here, the Pericles funerary prayer. In this text, we'll see that the king of the people of Athens, well, he proclaimed during the funeral of the first killed soldiers in the Peloponnesian Wars that actually in Athens, every man is like a king. Everyone is respected. Everyone is allowed to have his freedom and liberty. It's more or less what the human rights say. Now, in the Middle Ages of England, there was also a human rights declaration saying that the king, it's called the Magna Carta of the freedoms, no? Magna Carta Libertatum. Well, here it says that the noblemen who are below the king cannot be abused by the king. So the king doesn't have a right to take their possessions away or to have their women or so. No? So the king is above the noblemen, but they are all equal and have the same rights. This is more or less what this Carta Magna says. And there is another example at the end of the Middle Ages in Spain, in which the Catholic kings declared a law by which everyone had a right to move freely inside the country, because there were normally noblemen, local authorities that would not allow people to go to fly away or to just leave a town without. Well, they made them leave their personal belongings behind, so they could keep the houses and so. I mean, the noblemen of a town would keep the houses of the people going away. And when I say the houses, I mean also their old personal possessions like the livestock and all the furniture and so. No, so the Catholic kings proclaimed a law saying that everyone had the right to take his things with him in moving about the country. So it's like the human right of the right to immigrate inside your own country that we will find again in the 20th century. So as you can see, these all three rights are actually not really individual. They apply only to free men. Okay, for example, Pericles' funerary prayer didn't apply to women, to slaves, or to strangers, because the Athenian soldiers were people that had been born in Athens and were not slaves, or they were free men. The Carta Magna doesn't apply either to the shepherds or the laborers. It only applied to gentlemen. And also, this Catholic king's law applied only to people with possessions. It didn't apply to people with nothing or to the poor. And they apply to the head of every family, so to men, not to women. So these three declarations of rights apply only to a certain kind of people. They were not intended as universal rights. Now, the Bill of Rights in Virginia, which was afterwards copied by other states of the future United States of America, and also the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen in the French Revolution, 1789, these two declarations intended to be universal, not only belonging to a certain kind of people. They were not to be applied only to white men, to rich men. But in practice, they were so. I mean, this Bill of Rights, stating that every citizen in the state of Virginia is free by birth and equal of rights with every other man. Well, it didn't apply to slaves, to black people. And after they declared democracy in France, and they took the king away, and they declared the republic during the French Revolution. After that, instead of having general elections with universal suffrage, they had census suffrage, which means that only rich people, only proprietors could vote. So these two declarations here, they were intended to be universal, but in practice, they excluded slaves and poor people as well. Now, let's go for the Declaration of 1948, which was... Okay, and the final change was that in the first formula of the Declaration of Rights, the rights of 1789, they said the rights of man, whereas in the Declaration of 1948, they say human rights. Well, this is important when we discuss the fourth generation rights later on. What are the main features of the rights? First is that they are inherent, which means that everyone has has rights just for the fact of being a human being, no? And they cannot be taken away from anyone. The second feature is that they are natural, which means that there can't be a single law in any country that goes against them, because they are more important than the law. They are above previous and above and higher to any positive law. When I say positive law, I mean every law that has been effectively declared in any legislation of any country. Also, they are inviolable, which means that you cannot deprive anyone from his rights, from their rights. But also mean that they are not unlimited. No, it means that you cannot interfere with other people's rights. No? You are free, but you cannot hurt anyone. No? Whatever you do. So it also means that you can be punished for hurting other people. So you can be legally deprived of some of your rights, taking on account that such thing has to be done in a proportionate way. For example, you can go to jail in countries that respect human rights. You can be deprived of your freedom just for a period of time, according proportionately to whatever you have done against other people's rights. Also, they are inalienable, which means that no one can renounce their rights. This is a very interesting doctrine. For example, in every Western country, you have a right to marry. That doesn't mean that you have to marry. So you can choose not to fulfill one of your rights. But what you cannot do, and this is what means that it is inalienable, is that you cannot renounce your rights. I mean, you cannot, for example, support a political party that would defend that you don't have a right to get married. You don't have a right to choose to get married or not. For example, you can choose to have children or not, because having children is your right. But what you cannot do is to support a political party that says that you are not allowed to have children, because this is against your own rights. No? Inalienable means that you cannot transfer your rights to anyone else, to be deprived from outside. You cannot agree of being deprived of your rights from outside. That means that they are inalienable. This is also important from the point of view of our next topic, euthanasia. No? Because the people who are in favor of euthanasia are saying that they are renouncing to their right of being alive. No? Somehow what they're saying is giving permission to somebody else, for example, a doctor, to kill them. And normally that was typically interpreted as alienate yourself from your rights. No? This, in principle, euthanasia is against this doctrine that says that your rights are inalienable. Then you cannot give your rights to someone else. We will discuss that in our next topic. And finally, rights are universal. Oops, sorry. Let's go back a little bit again. Well, I don't seem to be able to do that. Well, universal means that they are applied. They have to be applied to everyone. No? Men, women, children, and so on. So what human rights are there? Now this is our last slide. Yeah? And this is also necessary to learn for the future exam and for future references. There are four generations of rights, or actually only three of them, because these fourth generation rights are special, as we will discuss later on. The first generation rights were they are also called political rights. There are rights such as freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of association, freedom of thought. No, these are your rights of being able to say whatever you want in public, being able to defend your own ideas and thoughts, being able to have your own religion. No one can impose to you what to say, what to think, what to do. No, these are, in one word, the different freedoms that you have as a citizen, and basically you can do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt any other people. No? These were the first generations because the bourgeoisie, the ones that make for example, the French Revolution, wanted to take part in the government of the country. They didn't want to be excluded. So they wanted to form political parties. They wanted to have a vote. They wanted to be relevant in the life of the political life of the society. So these were the first that were declared, or the one that were defended. The second generation rights are also called social rights, because why do you want to have a vote in the election if you're on your country? If you are poor, for example, you don't have a house, you don't have a job. I mean, it's more important for everyone to have a job first, to have a house, to be healthy, to have something clothes for dressing, and etc. before having the right to vote, for example. No? Both are also are important, but in the end, you need first this necessity to cover these necessities, rather than having, I don't know, the right to choose your own religion. No? If you're cold, if you are hungry, you don't mind about your own religion. So second generation rights actually come first in point of time, but were defended in the second place. So I repeat, second generation rights are the right to have a job, the right to have a house, the right to have clothing, the right to have food, obviously, etc. Third generation rights are collective rights. The first and the second generation defend your personal or your individual rights, but who defend your right of using a particular language, for example, inside a country? Yeah? Many times, for example, there have been countries that have acted against the minorities within their countries, trying to forbid their language or their cultural heritage. Now, the third generation rights are collective rights, defending, for example, the right to use one language and to have one cultural identity, even if you're a minority. Third generation right is also the right of living in peace, to be protected from wars, which is not individual, is from rights of a country or a nation or a group of people inside one nation. Third generation right is, for example, the right of living in a healthy and sustainable environment, which is an obligation that we have, and also a right that we have to live in a place which is not polluted. We have enough natural resources, energetic resources for us and for the future generations. So this kind of rights that preserve human life are also are collective, and they are inside the third generation rights. And the fourth generation rights is an empty list. This is, and I said, we saw before that they changed the name from the Declaration of the Man and the Citizen in the French Revolution to Declaration of Rights. Without the de, they dropped the rights. They said only rights. Why? Because nobody knows how many rights are there, what human rights are there, how many of them are there. Because in the future, new developments in technology, in the culture, and so will reveal that there are human needs that have to be protected and covered by new Declaration of Rights. I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, when digital technologies have arrived, some people defend that we have digital rights, which means that our data have to be protected from pirates, have to be protected as we protect ourselves or our own identity. And also some people say, for example, going back to euthanasia, some people say that we have a right to choose the way we die, which is something that none of the previous declarations of rights have ever said or have ever thought of. Well, this is a summing up of the lesson. Please make sure that you read the class notes. See you.